Okay.
All right, you got some story or something for us?
Yeah. This isn't about me. This was an article that I read a few years ago, and for some reason it just really clicked with me. It got me thinking about this question, your passion in a career and whether that works or not. So there was this guy, or the guy who wrote the article. He started out as a hobbyist beer brewer. Something he did, he'd brew a batch and then, give it to friends or even sell it sometimes. And he just loved it. That was his passion. And I think there are a lot of people like this. I've had conversations with friends where we were talking about what it would be like to open a brewery. So I think a lot of people have this. But this guy did it. He quit his job, he got into beer brewing, and he worked in a brewery and then eventually opened one. And he wrote this article. I think the title is So You Want to Be a Beer Brewer. And he describes what it is actually like to have that passion, follow the dream, and do it. And he's talking about what it is like to actually have your brewery and what that is like day to day. And he said that there's pretty much two sides to it. On the one hand, you clean all day, every day. You start out the day cleaning, you finish the day cleaning, and in between, you mostly just clean stuff. You also do a lot of logging, where if you make any little change, you have to write it down. You keep careful notes. You have to note what's been cleaned and what hasn't, and what ingredients you put in. And there's cleaning, there's record keeping, and then there's also selling stuff, where you have this. You go from your day of very boring to most people methodical cleaning of things, and then you show up at some bar or restaurant where you know zero people and you have to just find somebody to talk to and convince them that they ought to sell your beer, which is not necessarily what you would think about when you picture yourself opening a brewery, but that's fundamental to how it survives. And it turns out that this guy loves it. He likes cleaning stuff. He's pretty cool to just sit there and clean for hours and hours and hours every day. And he apparently seems to like being a salesman, more or less. But the way he describes it, the thing that you picture when you're thinking about opening a brewery is you in a lab, brewing stuff and, mixing things together and trying it and, analyzing it and trying to figure out how to make some great beer. But that mostly isn't really what happens. Mostly your day is going to be cleaning things and selling stuff. And I bring it up because that changed my ideas of the passion career spectrum, I guess. I'd always pictured, especially when I was younger, when I was trying to do this kind of thing, I always figured that if you're passionate about something and if you're lucky enough, you can turn it into the thing you do all day. But it's not always that simple.
Right. Well, is that similar to what you've experienced as a professional in what you do?
Well, it's complicated for me because when I was younger, just starting out or finish high school and college, I was on an engineering track. And I knew that was not my passion. Certainly not at the time. That was stuff that I figured would get me a job if I did it, if I did well in school, and I would get paid. But I had no real passion for it at all. Music was the thing that I cared about. So for me, the idea of pursuing that was going to college for that instead of engineering. And I did that. And in my head, I had this idea that if I could just get into school for it, if I could spend 4 years of my life purely focused on this thing, then I would come out the other end really good at it. I would be a fantastic musician, guitar player, and then I would, from there, just figure out what I wanted to do for a career. In a weird way, it's kind of similar to what causes me to procrastinate sometimes, that future fantasy thing. That was very much what happened when I decided to go to music school. Was I had this fantasy of future me is going to be this incredible musician if I can just get into doing this 4 years of study. And I never really had any clear concept of what that would actually look like, what kind of job or career I would actually have after that. And
So
when
you went into music school just wanting to somehow be a musician in some capacity in the future and make money off of it. But you
yes,
didn't have a real clear path.
I had nothing even close to a clear path. I had this fantasy of if I can just get in, I will be a musician.
That's exactly what I did with music as well. It was, I'll just play a lot of music, and one day I will magically
Yes.
make money off of it, and that'll be my life.
Yeah. And I guess the beer brewer story, that's much closer to reality than anything that I was thinking about. This
Well,
guy describes what trying to take something you care about and turning it into an actual career means that it's going to be really different, and you might like it. He does, but it doesn't feel like it's that related to the thing you were doing in the first place.
well, I well, an interesting story, and it brings up a good point, but I don't know if I completely agree with it.
Oh, I don't know if I completely
100%.
agree with it either, but it's at least central to the issue, right? There's always those two sides to the argument
Yeah.
of, follow your heart and your dreams will come true, and the whole Disney-esque, way of
Right.
thinking. And then if you ever try to do what you care about, it's going to turn to crap and you'll hate it.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that you might also disagree. But I think something that happens is people will start following their passion, or start making a career out of it. And then all of a sudden it starts turning into something that they don't recognize, or something they didn't actually set out to do. And then they just blame the fact that they committed themselves to this passion, and that commitment is the bad thing, as if committing to your passion is a bad thing, because it will eventually turn into something that's not
Mhm.
good, you know.
Yeah.
But I think what, in some cases, or maybe in most cases, what's actually happening is all of these other layers are coming into play, not the passion. The passion hasn't changed. It's that all of these other things are becoming involved as well. And that's the thing that is causing the issues. Like, say maybe he didn't like cleaning, the
Right.
brewery guy. He didn't like cleaning, and he didn't like marketing stuff, but he was really interested in brewing. I think it would be a mistake for him to just drop out of that altogether. There may be a way for him to focus just on brewing, brewery,
Brewery.
brewerying, whatever.
Yeah.
That aspect of it that he liked, and maybe delegate some of that other stuff out so that he could stick more to his passion. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah. To me, obviously this is a huge question. It's incredibly important to many, many people. I would say that most people probably have at least considered this. Should I follow a career path that I am pretty confident is going to get me money and a stable job, or should I do this thing that I really love? That I just feel like that choice has come up for just about everyone. And people debate this on both sides all the time. You'll hear plenty of people saying, don't do it. It sucks. It totally ruined the thing that I cared about. Other people, if you love what you do, you won't work a day in your life. And of course you should follow your dreams. And obviously we can't answer the question, right? It's super personal. It depends on a lot of things. But I think the goal for this show is to try and give anyone considering this question, try and give them ways of thinking about it, ways of trying to be able to get to a decision. Because for me, and there's been a few different stages in my life and things that I've gone after. And so if we're talking about the going to music school, which was a big follow your passion moment for me, I did not have any real way of considering that decision. I basically just did it with this ridiculous fantasy in my head that didn't make any sense, and that's what I went with. And of course it didn't work out. I mean, I went to school and that is what it was, and then I got done and then I had no plans. So I want to, I guess what I'm saying is I want to work on ways of thinking about this for people. And I think that you can pretty much boil the question down into two things. One, if you have this thing that you care about, can you turn it into a career? Sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes it's no. But can that be done? And then number two, if you do, are you still going to like it? It's, with the beer brewing thing, the guy turned it into a career and he happened to still like it, but it was pretty different than what he was doing before. So that's something you have to consider too. Is that a fair way of looking at it?
Yes. I just that second part of it, as soon as you turn it into a career, it totally changes. That's just not true necessarily. Because it's, if you remove the term career from it, what exactly is happening? I mean, of course, it's different for everyone, but it's that all these other things start getting thrown in, and there's ways around that in some cases that you maybe just hadn't thought about.
To me, I think that if you have something that you care about and it isn't currently a career, it's something that you do in your free time and it's not making money. I mean, career is just another way of saying it needs to make you money at some point, right?
Right.
If you're doing a thing and you love it, pretty much by definition, if you're going to try and turn it into something that makes you money, it has to change at least some. I think that's tautological, right? Because whatever you're doing, if it's not making money, you're going to have to do it differently if it's going to make you money, right?
Okay, yeah.
I mean, if you sit in your room and you play guitar by yourself in the evenings and you love it and that's just all that you can think about and that's what you look forward to doing, you can't just keep doing that because nobody's going to pay you to do that. You're going to have to change it somehow in order to get money. So
that's correct.
how you have to change it is what you have to consider. You're going to have to make it different. And then when you do that, are you still going to like it, I guess, is my way of looking at it.
Okay, yeah. That's
fair. Right. So for you did this, right? You liked or had a passion for doing art. And then you went and got a job, or you went through many years of study, basically. You were self-taught, and then you went and got a job. So from the, I think there's 2 points there. One is pre-intense, I'm gonna get good at this. Earlier when it was really just a hobby and you weren't necessarily working to get great at it, other than just casually. What was that like compared to when you decided, okay, I'm going to turn this into a job and now I'm locked in my room and I'm working on this? And then also what changed when you actually did get a job? But start with the first thing. Hobby artist to serious study artist.
Well, actually, the hobby artist, serious study artist was just the same thing, almost off the bat. When I don't know, I started getting into it maybe 8 years ago, and I became really, really into it. And I pretty quickly decided I want to make a career out of this, but I had no specific thing. Just like you with music, it was this real vague thing. I kind of knew the things I wanted to get good at, but I didn't know the exact industry I wanted to go into or what that job would even look like. It was just sort of this weird fantasy in the future. So for a few years, I mean, I was studying like crazy to somehow in the future make money off of this.
Right.
But it was purely out of enjoyment. I really loved it and I didn't want it to go away. So I wanted to make a career out of it.
So you really liked the I'm trying to get good at this part of it, right?
Oh, yeah. It wasn't just about, one thing that the career did for me was it gave me an excuse and a reason to always be able to work on it. Because I wanted to eventually make it a career, it became a priority. And when it becomes a priority, I'm able to work on it more. Whereas if it was just a hobby, I have to spend a bunch of time on something else to make money. And then if I have time, I can do it as a hobby. This was so important to me that I wanted to work on it all the time. And because of that, I knew I had to make it a career in order for me to justify working on it that much.
So that to me feels like an important point, because some people will do something because they enjoy it. They just enjoy doing the thing that they're doing. You might learn guitar and you learn some chords, and then you sit there and you strum through some chords and you sing a song, and that's just really enjoyable to you. And on the next day, maybe you learn a different song and you strum the chords and you sing the song, and you just like doing that. You're playing music, it's fun, and that's that. Other people are not motivated in the same way, and I am one of these people, and it sounds like you are too, where if I pick up a guitar, I'm going to try to get better than I was yesterday. It is in every sense a pursuit of something. I'm trying to push my skill further. And I don't want to imply that one is necessarily better than the other, but that's my way of thinking. So for you, it sounds like when you were doing art more in a for fun capacity, you're still trying to get good. And then when you switched into, okay, I got to get really good so I can get a career, you're pretty much just doing more of the same thing. And that thing, trying to get better at art, is something that you really love.
It was not enough for me to just call it a hobby. I mean, I had to spend every moment
Right.
involved in it in some way.
Right. And you wanted to get good at it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it made sense for me to make a career out of that. And the fact that I saw it as a possibility, I think.
Yeah.
Because of the books I had, they talked about ways in which you could learn, and that was really inspiring. And I had a feeling that was very motivating for me, that it was actually possible for me to make a career out of it.
Right. But I I have gone through very similar metamorphoses in my life too. And I think that if you are someone who's considering trying to turn something you care about into a career, I think you kind of have to like that part of it. You have to like the idea of pushing yourself and trying to get really good at it. And not everybody does. If you just enjoy doing it and that's where it stops, and you aren't motivated to constantly be trying to force yourself to get better, then I won't say you wouldn't like it if you started pursuing it really aggressively, trying to get it up to that level. But if you did like it would be for a different reason than you did it in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like pushing a skill really hard is a whole different thing than just sitting there relaxed playing guitar for fun.
Right. Yeah. This making a career out of your passion is a very, very vague,
Right.
weird term that I don't even really like.
I don't either.
But I guess we're using it. And I don't know a whole lot of people that are like me in this way, that get so obsessed with this thing. But they're out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you've kind of done the same thing. But you have to really, really want it, especially if you're going to be self-taught in it. But the main, I think maybe one of the main driving factors for me was the legitimacy, or the idea that the career, like say if I actually got a job doing this, it would legitimize everything that I had done. It would mean that I'm actually good enough, or I am actually to a level, and that would just reinforce, or it would legitimize what I've done. I think that was probably a big driving factor for me.
So there's been many things that have been kind of like that for me, where I am working really hard on something, sometimes really hard for many months or even years, and then there comes this moment or period of time where you have to try to make it mean something in a way. You're going to try to sell this thing that you built,
Right.
or you're going to try and get somebody to hire you to do this thing that you've spent a lot of time doing. And I think that the nature of the world is that there aren't guarantees. I have failed at some of these things. You know, we built a game that we worked very hard on and released it, and I wouldn't say it failed, but it didn't do great. for several reasons. And I have released other
Yeah.
things that have done well, but unfortunately, you weren't the other half of those projects.
Maybe I was the reason it failed.
I don't think so. I'm pretty confident it
I
wasn't.
one day
But
we should bring that back and retry. But
yeah, yeah.
go on.
But the point is, if you're going to try to do that, if you have this thing that you care about, your passion, and you're going to pour a bunch of time into it and try and turn it into something that's successful in order to retroactively validate all that stuff you did, I think you have to accept the possibility that it will not work. And I wouldn't say that those years go to waste, but they certainly didn't pay off in the way that you wanted them to. And you just have to be comfortable with that potential outcome. And that's tough for people to handle. But I think you just do. You have to say, okay, I'm going to try this. I'm going to push really hard on this thing, and it might not work. And I might get to the end of it and think, well, there goes 3 years of my life. I
That
mean, you
might
still
be the
developed a
hardest
skill.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be the hardest thing ever.
Yeah.
It's just deciding that I'm going to do this, and I might not make it for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years or something, but I'm not going to stop until I do. Or maybe you set
Yeah.
a date to where you give up. I don't know.
A lot of times you'll hear the other piece of advice. You'll hear people say, well, just do what you care about and it'll work out. And the truth is that it might not. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but you are gonna have to be okay with that. You are taking a risk. You just are.
Okay, so one thing I was going to say is I was working towards this weird vague someday I'm going to get a job in this.
Yeah.
Whatever. I'm going to work as hard as I can and just get better at it. I had a pretty clear idea of what type of artist I wanted to be, but not exactly what job that would be or anything.
Mhm.
I was really saved by my friend who worked in the themed entertainment industry. And he's the one that said, give me a portfolio. I think I can get you a job.
Yeah.
And so and for the next year, I worked on building a portfolio for a very specific job. So I kind of owe it all to him for giving me that. But for anybody who's trying to make a career out of something, you need a specific
Mhm.
job. You can't do what you did and what I did with music and just head towards some weird vague thing. You have to target something and go directly towards that. And of course, that might change along the way. But
Right.
um,
Yeah, or
it's a
you might
huge
you might
factor.
yes, and you might even find something similar that wasn't quite what you were aiming for, but yes, the idea that you just develop some skill at home by yourself and then show up and hope that somebody gives you a job is not how it works.
Right.
Yeah, just like you said, that was my problem with music, was I just never had a plan. I never thought of it that way. My plan was to go to school for it and then from there see what happens.
Right.
And nothing happened because I had no plan. Nobody showed up the day after I graduated and said, "Great job. We're here to offer you a job." They just
Yeah.
I think yeah, there's kind of two possible avenues for something that you are working on. There's the job avenue, which is what you did, and kind of what I did with software, which doesn't becoming a software developer doesn't really sound like the following a passion, but for me it kind of was at the time. I was teaching music, which I did really like, but did not really want to stick with for a long time. And then the idea of doing software development showed itself, and I started just getting really excited about it and really liking it, and then decided, you know what, I'm just going to do this and go after it. But so there's the job angle where you try and get somebody to hire you and pay you to do a thing for them. And that could be in a career field that you are not very passionate about, or maybe you're okay with but don't love. it could be something that you are very passionate about, like for you, art. You basically said, I'm going to make this happen. I want to get a job as an artist, and you did. But then there's also another one that I think a lot of people might have in their heads, which is not that they want to get a job, but that they want to basically become famous and make money and have a career doing the thing that they do without necessarily working for somebody. So if you are a musician, the idea of becoming a famous musician who makes money by doing shows and selling albums and things like that. You aren't necessarily working for somebody, you're doing your own thing. Running your own business could be maybe in that category. If you aren't getting a job with somebody, you're starting a business and then getting it off the ground and hoping to find success, where just the normal human beings give you money, not an employer. Right?
Right. Yeah, and that's a totally legitimate career. You just have to be really smart about it.
And I think if you get a job, it's a little bit easier to think about in more concrete terms. Like with you identified the themed entertainment industry as a place where you can be an artist and get hired to do concept art for these kinds of things. But that's a real job. There's presumably a fair number of positions open, right? It's not like there's one job available for that.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you had decided instead, I'm going to just be a famous artist, I'm going to do paintings and then people are going to love them and pay millions of dollars for them, that would have been a bit of a different experience, right?
Yeah. But I mean, it's being done. I know artists that do that do not work for anyone but themselves. They make their own rules and they run a business.
Well, okay,
Very
freelance
smart about
or famous artist?
famous artists. They work
Yeah.
for themselves. They've built their own brand. They sell their own products. They run their whole show themselves. They work for no one. And it's a business. I mean, you have to run it like a business. It's not a magical thing. People don't just throw money at them. They're constantly putting out paintings, and they have a whole system set up. But I don't know if that's the point that you're trying to make.
Well, more than I think it's worth drawing a distinction between those two things of getting hired, getting a job. Pretty much, if you can get hired and you can not get fired, you will continue to receive a paycheck. It's right.
Yeah.
If you're trying to go the other route of get something off the ground and just become famous type of thing, that's a bit of a different ball game, I think.
It is. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, which is what I tried to do, or thought that I would try to do with music. I thought that if I just wrote good songs, somehow magically something would happen,
right,
where money would start coming in and I would be famous, and then everything would be great. Didn't happen.
Right. Well, because that's not how it happens.
Right, because that's not. Yeah, it doesn't work like
All right.
that.
Same for me. I went to school to become good at guitar playing. I became okay at guitar playing, and no money happened.
Right.
I played a few little shows around town and stuff, and that was about it.
Right. So what should you have done?
Well, I should have thought about whether or not that even made sense, and it doesn't. I went to school for classical guitar, right? And I had not even heard of a classical guitar before I decided to go to school for it, which in a way seems kind of stupid to go to school for something that wasn't even what I was interested in. But I figured, think of it almost like the Jedi Academy, where if I could go to school for this thing, even if it wasn't quite what I had in mind, by the end of it, I'm just going to be amazing at it. And I'm sure that if I'm an amazing classical guitar player, I could just go do anything else that I want to. I could pick up some other instrument and I'd be amazing at that too, surely. And I could go get a job or become famous doing that thing. And that is not how it works at all. Classical guitar on its own is insanely difficult. It is, everyone says that their instrument is the hardest instrument, but it's really hard. It's a really hard instrument to play. And there are no jobs there. There's a handful of famous classical guitarists, and that's it. And I mean a small handful, and they've been
But
famous for decades.
who cares if they're famous? Do you think they're actually making money off of that?
Well, some of them, yeah. I mean, the top
Even if
players.
people know who they are, I mean, is that actually sustainable?
Well, yeah, and this is kind of the point, is that I never thought about this. I never thought about,
Yeah.
okay, if I go to school as a performing artist in classical guitar, can I turn that into something that makes me money? And if I had thought about it and researched it, the answer would have been no, because even the people, I don't necessarily know how much money these people make, but you know, there's the famous classical guitarists, and many of them are professors at colleges, which makes me think that they don't make enough money as a solo artist and they need to go teach somewhere, or maybe they want to, I don't know.
Yeah.
But you know, some of them, the successful ones, they have albums, they do concerts, and people go to see them, but there's just a small handful, and it's not like there's new people showing up every 6 months. You know, it's
Right.
a really tight group, because, or not tight group, it's a small group, because no, there's not a lot of demand for classical guitar.
Right.
Right.
But I mean, they could be totally fulfilled and happy doing that, you know, playing, they get to play their, they get to pursue their passion, and then, you know, they hold another job that,
Well,
you know,
right,
they teach, and that's a whole balance
which
that
is
they just,
totally fine.
yeah.
But the thing is that I thought that I could go be a famous musician without actually thinking about how many famous musician.
Maybe it was the shot we took.
Maybe it
I
was. I
wanted
don't
to
know.
say
We're both doing
brewery.
this. Yeah. If I wanted to be a famous musician, then how many spots are available for that? And the answer is basically none. So I would have had to do something else, like be a professor, which also is insanely difficult to get into. You know, have to spend a long time working your way up to where you actually get a professorship position. So
Right.
all of those options I just had not thought about.
Well, when you're younger, I mean, all the way until you walk outside of the education door and you're then into the real world. Up until that point, you think of all of these things as these huge, kind of magical, vague concepts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you see it happen. You see these famous musicians that you love, and you know, these artists and whatever, and they've somehow magically made it. You're not reading about how they've made all of these record deals and negotiated these prices with these record companies
Right.
and whatever. You're not reading about that. You listen to their wonderful music. They've somehow lived this magical, dramatic life, and it just looks incredible. But when you walk out of the education door into the real world, you have to think extremely practically. Uh, you have to
Yes.
think in
Yes.
completely different terms, and it's a totally different world. All of a sudden, those famous musicians are actually just real people, that are making not that much money and are possibly miserable. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
they become real people, and they're
Right.
totally different. All of them are different, and everything's just so much different than you grew up believing. And so, if you have made your career plans as a child or as someone who thinks that way in these weird, vague terms, once you get to the beginning of where your career is supposed to start, it won't make sense because you haven't thought about it in the realistic way that you should have been thinking
Right.
about it, but you didn't know any better.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I did, which was to have a fantasy view of the future, or this job, career, life that I would live, without thinking that no, you can't just imagine this wonderful future that may or may not exist. What I should have done is seriously considered the question of what are the available things that I can do when I get out of school? Can I be a teacher? Can I be a performing classical guitarist? Can I join a band and whatever? And what I would have come up with, I think, is that at the level of somebody who went to college for 4 years to study an instrument that they hadn't really played before, you're going to get to a level where you could be a teacher, which is what I did. not even on purpose. It's just a job that I had on the side, and eventually figured, well, this is my only way of making money, so this is what I'm gonna do. And that was the
You mean
obvious
teaching in
outcome.
real life?
What's that?
You taught in real life. That's what you keep.
Yeah. I had, a little studio and I taught students. That was the pretty much the only logical outcome of me going to school for classical guitar performance. Right? There nothing else really could have happened. And I should have just realized that. And I liked teaching. I wasn't upset about it, but it certainly wasn't what I was picturing beforehand. But it is what happened, and I should have understood that and at least thought through it.
Yeah.
And I realized later on in my school career that when it comes to the classical world of performing arts, whether you're a pianist or a classical guitarist, whatever, if you're talking about being a composer, there's a pretty broad spectrum of things you can do, right? If you're writing your own music, then you can hopefully be unique. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to find success, but you can at least be unique. And you can find some niche of the world where people like your music more than they like other people's music, or at least they like it a lot, right? But if you're a performer, it's much closer to a sport. If you're a golfer, you got to be better at it than the other golfers. And you have a handful of people at the very top who are really good, and then a whole bunch of other people who just can't quite get there. And that's relatively close to how it is in classical performing arts. Everybody's pretty much playing the same music. You just have to do it better. And there's a little bit of room there. Some people have different, interpretations or styles, and some people might prefer one person's way of playing than another. But there aren't 10,000 pianists who are all successful playing the same song. There's a handful that people really like. And I did not recognize that about the classical music world. It's, like I said, it's much closer to a sport or a competition than other things are.
So, classical music for you was a passion that did not quite make it into career mode because you just couldn't make that leap, and your
Well,
goals weren't quite right.
I had never even thought about what the leap meant. I guess my point with getting into that was that I realized towards the end of school that if you want to be one of those people, if my dream really was to become a top tier performing classical artist, then it is competitive, very competitive, and you would be competing with people who are obsessed on a level that even I am not capable of being, where they will play their instrument all day, every day, relentlessly, with very little in the way of other hobbies or interests for decades. I mean, that's just what they live and breathe, and those are the types of people who tend to be at the top. And it seems like it takes a unique personality. The people that I knew that were really, really good, that were at least close to that upper tier or felt like they could be, they tended to be, I don't want to say odd, but just a bit more eccentric than your average person. They tended to, I think they were a bit farther out on the bell curve of people who their minds just really fixated, and they could do that one thing for all day, every day, for literally years and years. And I realized that I was not like that. I really loved it and I was obsessed with it, but I was also interested in other things. And, I started teaching and I really liked that. I started getting really interested in teaching and how to be good at it and how you work with different people and that kind of thing. So I never thought about it, but if I had thought about it, or when I finally did towards the end of school, I realized that the path to this fantasy thing that I was thinking about was not a path I would want to be on.
Well, I think that is a wonderful thing. You realized that what you thought you wanted was not actually your passion.
Yes.
The brewery guy, he got into it and realized that it involved a lot of cleaning and a lot of other things. Well, okay, he's not a good example because he actually liked it. But say he got into it and he didn't like those other things,
Yeah.
but he was still super passionate about the brewing. Uh, Maybe he could have done some slightly different thing and done that. I guess I'm
Yeah.
twisting his example into something else. But what I'm saying is, you realized that this thing that you have been going for wasn't actually the thing that you were passionate about. It wasn't that the 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 career or the passion would have changed. Is that passion never changed.
Right.
You still have a passion. It just wasn't what you thought it was. Right.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I This was one of the major points I wanted to bring up tonight, but I think for anyone considering this, where you're trying to, first of all, don't be like me where you just simply don't think about it. You need to start thinking about it. But a major piece of being able to figure this out is I think it's important to understand why you like something. Try and identify what the fundamental pieces of that are. And it's very hard to do, but this is a very important question. But if you can, then you can start to reason about, okay, if I were to try and follow a career with this thing that I care about, are those fundamental things still going to be there? And for me, with one thing that I have realized about myself is that I used to think that I loved learning, as cheesy as that sounds, but I don't. Not exactly. It, so there are some people who, let's say a history buff, right? Somebody who just really likes reading about history. You know, they'll sit there and they'll read novels, they'll read textbooks, they'll go on Wikipedia and just for hours crawl through these articles about what happened and why it happened, and that's just something they find really interesting. I'm not like that. That's not the kind of thing that I find really fascinating. I am much more the type where I want to develop a skill. You know, I don't love sitting there reading about facts and things for hours and hours. I'm more interested in how do I get good at playing the guitar or playing the piano? How do I get good at building software or lifting weights or anything? Pretty much anything that I get into, my goal from the start, or not even goal, but just the thing that I'm wanting to do is to just get better and better at that thing. That is every hobby that I have, every interest that I've had. It's me trying to improve my skills at something. That is something that I really, really enjoy, not the learning. And I have realized that when you start out with something, you know, some new thing that you're working on or pursuing, trying to get good at, for the first couple years, there's a lot of improvement to be had. You know, if you're new at it, then pretty much anything you do, you're going to become better at it. And you will, you know, for a long time, you'll have to find ways of improving. And it's, you know, it's difficult, but it's doable. But after several years, the nature of the thing changes, where it can become very difficult to continue improving. You know, you're no longer at that point where anything you do is new and your mind adapts to it. You're really having to figure out where the boundaries are and how do I actually improve this skill. I mean, just with, let's say, powerlifting, early on, and this is the case for anybody, if you just lift weights, you get stronger. If you haven't ever done it before, your body just adapts to it because your body just goes, oh my God, what is happening? This is really hard. We have to figure out how to not, you know, snap in half while we lift this barbell. And you just get stronger. But years into it, when you've been pushing on it for a long time, it becomes really difficult. I have gone through, I don't know, 8 or 10 month stretches where my bench press did not go up at all. And I worked out consistently and controlled my diet and, you know, really, really worked to try and improve it, and it didn't. That is a whole different thing than when you're at the start just getting better at something. So my point is, I really like improving at things, developing skills, and that happens a lot in the first few years of something, and it becomes very different and very difficult when you get into the later stages. So that is a big part of why even in music school, where I learned the classical guitar and then I played it and started studying it, towards the later few years of being in school, I really just wanted to play piano. I liked the piano. It was new and I was learning a lot and it was really fun. And I neglected playing classical guitar because I wanted to play piano. And that's just kind of how I'm wired. And I think I could maybe improve upon that to where I could stay more focused on one thing for a longer period of time. But that's just fundamental to how I am. And that does not work for somebody who is going to try and become the best classical guitar player ever. You need to be very focused on one thing for a very long time. So
Well,
go ahead.
okay, go ahead, make your point.
Well, my point is, I didn't really understand that about myself, and now I do.
Yeah.
And I've realized that my passion for playing music was very much driven by me improving at a skill. That was a big part of why I enjoyed that so much. And it changed years later. You know, that I wouldn't say the passion was gone, but the relationship with it was a bit different. It was not as exciting. It was not as wonderful. And it wasn't, you know, the thing that I spent all my time thinking about because it became really hard to get better. And if I had known that about myself a little bit more clearly, then I might have been able to think more clearly about, okay, what do I really want to do? What do I want to turn into a career, you know, and still be doing 10 years from now?
Well, this part excites me because you you are a type of person, and there's a lot of people that are like you, in that they want to learn all these different skills, and
Yeah.
they want to pursue all of these different things. So how in the world do you make a career, commit to one thing forever? How do you do that if you're interested in all of these different things? Well, you don't. What you have done with your career is you've made it possible for yourself to continue pursuing all of these different things and make money at the same time. You don't have you do have a single freelance main income, but you have multiple ways of making money.
Yeah.
You have your old YouTube channel, which still brings in a lot, I don't, some mystery number of amount of income for you. It's a
It is
slice
it is
of
still a
the
source of
career
income,
pie.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a slice of the career pie for you. And another big slice is the programming. You have made this hybrid career that works for you,
Mm-hmm.
that embraces all of these different things that you're interested in. I don't think you make money off of StarCraft or powerlifting, right?
Uh,
Maybe you do
well,
sometimes.
I don't make money off of powerlifting. I think I won $10 in a tournament once
There you
from
go. So
StarCraft.
you make some money from StarCraft. But
Yeah.
I think you could find ways of monetizing those things. And then you have a career built out of all of these cool new interests that you have, and that
Yeah.
fits your lifestyle and your personality. And I think that's really interesting and really cool that a lot of people don't think of. And of course it couldn't work for everyone, but
Right.
um that is really cool.
Yeah, for me, following my passion turned out to be doing random things that I
Right.
really like.
Yeah.
And if you're smart about it, I think you can hopefully turn them into things that make money. And like you said, I actually make money from a lot of different things, and none of them make a lot, but when you add it up, I'm all right. I can keep the lights on.
Yeah.
And I get to pursue a lot of stuff that I'm very interested in.
So you asked me earlier, what happened when I got my job?
Yeah.
And it's complicated. If you rewind like 8 years when I first started getting into art, I was like a kid in a candy store, and I walked into the candy store, and it was this gorgeous, beautiful, shiny, sparkly, colorful place, and I wanted a piece and a taste of every single thing that I saw in there. And I wanted to, be a great figure artist and a great perspective drawer. And
Yeah.
I wanted to do environments and characters and all these different things, and I wanted to do movies and theme parks and illustration and advertising, everything. I just wanted to do everything. um And basically what happened when I got a job was I get I get hired at the job, and they only deal with one aisle in that candy store.
Oh,
And so I'm having to push away all of these other things that I was originally interested in and just focus on a small section of that. Like, say, I can't bring my oil paints to work. I can't do that. I can't sketch or I can't draw traditionally. I have to use Photoshop. I never wanted to use Photoshop, but that's what I got to do. And so I've had to extremely limit down the things I'm interested in. The passion for art is still there, and I'm still
right.
very passionate about everything that I've always been passionate about, but choosing a career has very much limited the amount of things that I can pursue. Um, and so I think that's something that a lot of people deal with, is that once they sign up for a career, there's a lot of compromises you have to make, a lot of changes you have to make. And you could blame the fact that you committed to a career as the main problem. But actually what's happened is the passion hasn't changed for me at all. I'm
Hmm.
still just as passionate as I've always been, but the the scenario is a little different. I can't pursue every single thing that I want to. But if I hadn't made that a career, I'm not sure if I could have pursued anything to the extent that I have now. So
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, I think that experience might be similar to what a lot of other people run into.
Right. So you're saying that you had to narrow down into something pretty specific, right? When you got the job, which I think is virtually always the case.
Right. You have to compromise. And I'm wondering if that is similar for you with, let's say, programming. You got real into programming, um, but are you
Yeah.
able to pursue every cool new thing that you
Well,
want to with programming, or do you
right.
have to cut it down?
So programming to me, the art of writing lines of code and getting things to work and all of that. There are parts of that that I do really like that I find interesting, but the reason I learned to do that wasn't that I just loved writing code. It was that I wanted to make something. Sort of similar, I would think, to, you know, being a painter. You're not necessarily loving every brushstroke you make. You're trying to do something. You're trying to create this thing that you've made. Uh, that's a maybe dumb way to look at it, but whatever. You're trying to make something, and that's what I love doing about, or that's what I loved about software development, is that it lets me make things, and it lets me make them in ways that are very cheap. You just need a computer, and you can put something together. It lets me, software is very powerful. You can also distribute it to people, and you don't have to really worry about much of anything. You don't have to call up a factory in China and get them to produce something so you can sell it. You can just send it off, and all of that with software, it removes a lot of the stuff that I wouldn't want to deal with, and it lets me just create stuff, and that's that. I don't have to worry about a whole lot else. That to me is something really enjoyable about that. And so part of the reason why I have been able to stick with it for quite a while is that for the projects that I'm interested in, I can just build something, and I'm going to build whatever it is that I happen to want to do. For the job part of it, for a while I was doing freelance, where I would, somebody would contact me, they have some job that they want me to do for them, and I would do it. And at first I thought that that would be great for me because it meant I could do lots of different jobs and I would always be doing something new and interesting. But it turned out that that wasn't really the case. And after the initial learning curve of a year or two, me getting pretty adept at those things, a lot of those jobs, even though they were different, they became pretty repetitive, where you're basically just taking some data off of a server and showing it to a user with photos and articles and things. So I wound up being forced to, like you said, focus on something pretty specific that to me wasn't necessarily extremely fun. So I did have to make some compromises there. It wasn't just this job where I got to spend all my hours every day building awesome things that I loved. It is work at the end of the day, and sometimes my interest will really spike and I'm really enjoying doing something and learning about something. Other times it's a drag, and it is what it is.
So there's a name, oh, the Overjustification Hypothesis. Have you heard of that?
I don't think so.
Maybe it's not a big thing, but I heard about it a long time ago. But basically, and I think this is something that people are afraid of when they think about turning their passion into a career, is that once you start getting rewarded for that thing, you may not like it anymore. Or once you start getting paid for it, you're sort of a sellout and you just don't like it anymore. Basically, there was a study. They took, I don't know, like 50 kids or something, and they separated them into three groups. In the first group, they gave them an expected reward, is what they called it. They told the kids that they would get a reward if they drew a picture. And apparently all 50 kids really liked to draw. So they told the first group, you will get a reward at the end if you draw a picture or whatever. The second group, they didn't tell the kids, and they gave a surprise reward at the end. In the third group, they didn't give any reward. They just asked the kids to draw a picture, and they drew a picture. And what they found was, after following these kids after the study and seeing what they did, the first group was the only group that stopped drawing. They stopped enjoying it, or by half. That half the group just stopped drawing. They stopped enjoying it. The ones that were told that they would get a reward at the end. Once the reward was taken away, they no longer enjoyed it. And even the people who did the study said, and I don't know how much you can trust this, but they said the pictures were less aesthetically pleasing, as if the kids didn't even really want to draw or didn't care or didn't even try to do a good job anymore. Whereas the other two groups, the one with the surprise reward and the no reward, continued to draw, and there was no change at all.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what they found was that when you tell someone that you're going to be rewarded for whatever they're working on, without that reward, they no longer want to do it. So after you're getting paid for this thing that you used to love, you no longer enjoy doing it in your free time. And I think that's something that people are very afraid of happening, or maybe it has happened to them. But I think it's interesting because it has not happened to me. That maybe in some ways, but getting paid for me doing the thing I'm passionate about has not taken away the passion for it.
So that's a extremely good thing to bring up. And I would say, so that feels pretty similar to my experience with YouTube, where I would create a video, upload it, and then you got a very concrete piece of feedback on it, which was how many people watched it.
Right.
And when I had started, when I was teaching in person, that obviously did not happen. I would try to explain something to someone, and then the only thing that happened was I witnessed with them how well it worked. How well did they understand it? How well did they respond? Do they just sit there looking confused, or did they get really excited and go, oh my God, I totally get it. That's amazing. That was the reward for that. And so my only interest in the working on the way I explain something was just to do it better, to try to get, to make it work better. But on YouTube, it's different because you basically get scored on everything, which is, you do something and it gets watched or not watched. And that did change the way I thought about that stuff. When you're getting a score on something, in a way, it's similar to making a post on Instagram. You're not, right. You don't take a photo and think, this is a great photo. I'm so happy with this photo I took. You externalize that feeling of happiness and reward, and you let other people judge it, and then you get a score. And that is something fairly similar to that was happening with YouTube, where I would get scored on, the explanation that I did on some topic. And I don't think I ever really thought about it, but it certainly was happening. And I think it is a danger. I think it is something that can happen. I think it may have a lot to do with how similar the thing you're getting paid for versus the thing you're doing as a hobby. If you have a job where people are paying you to do an oil painting and then judging it somehow, or you're getting rewarded, and then you went home and your hobby was doing very similar styled oil paintings and you did not get paid for those, I don't know, that might feel different to you. But what do you think?
Well, maybe, but I I started thinking of it like the whole gambling thing, and you
Mm-hmm.
get the surprise reward. Like you had no idea that surprise was coming, and so you want to keep doing it because maybe sometime after you finish this, you'll get that reward again. But it almost doesn't matter if you don't get the reward. Just like gambling, you keep doing it over and over and over again because theoretically maybe you're in search of that reward again.
Yeah.
Whereas if you get the same reward every time, like the expected reward, the first group, it, it's all about the reward in the end. So what you're doing is not the enjoyment, it's that finished product, that final reward that's interesting. And I think that maybe I have experienced that. I do freelance outside of my job because working full time is somehow not enough and I want to do more.
Yeah.
And I've found that almost always the freelance jobs that I take, I love them and I get super into them and very interested in them, and I'm real excited to do them. And it never ends for me. I never don't want to work on art anymore. Uh, and I think it's because it's a surprise reward. When I get paid at the end, it's not a surprise. I know I'm getting paid, or else I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess the other aspect of that is there could be a whole lot of other possibilities that come with that. So say I get paid and my client really loves my work, so they go tell other people, and then I get some other really cool job.
Mhm.
That's a surprise. I don't know the outcome of that. But I have had other jobs that are very regular, and I get the same amount of money every single time, and they never really lead to anything else. And in those jobs, it gets a little like, oh, I got to do this again.
Yeah.
It's not as exciting as the one-offs or the ones that are different every time. So I think it's worth looking at all of these different ways of getting rewarded in a job. If you're monetizing your work, is it a expected reward, or is it a surprise reward, or are you getting no reward, or is it just an internal satisfaction from it? So it's worth trying to categorize or label those different ways you're being rewarded
Mm-hmm.
instead of just uh, shunning getting paid altogether. Like, oh, I'm not going to get paid for this because it'll ruin the enjoyment of it, or I'll be a sellout or something.
That's a really good point. I think that falls into the category a little bit of why do you like something, right?
Yeah.
If you make a painting and you aren't getting paid or intending to get paid or anything, then I imagine you like it because there's some satisfaction of, oh, I executed this idea that I had, or I captured something, or I evoked a feeling. And that, to me, in a weird way, it's not that dissimilar to, if I start working on some software project that I'm interested in, that I'm just thinking about.
Right.
We'll talk about this in the future, but right now I'm working on a mouse accuracy trainer where you try to increase your ability to move a mouse around quickly and click on specific targets. And that, to me, is, I have zero intention of ever getting paid for that. I don't even know how I would. I don't want to. Like, it's fun because it's letting me explore something and try things and then see how I respond to it and what works and what doesn't. And
Right.
the reward of doing that project is this very open-ended thing of, how well is this going to work? How fun is it going to be? How's it going to look? How's it going to feel? I'm
Right.
creating something, and that is by definition a new thing that's interesting and it could be all kinds of things, but it's
Right.
very
It could
rewarding
lead
to
to all
me.
of these cool new things, and that's the way I
Right.
see each new project I get. It's very exciting for me because of all of these new possibilities that it suggests. that it could lead to. And yes, there's money involved, which is also exciting because that money could lead to, house renovations or whatever. And so that's exciting. It's not always as simple as I'm getting money and that's why I'm working.
Right.
It's I'm going to do this work and then all of these new cool things could happen. It's exciting.
Yeah, and I think that to worry about that for a lot of people is pretty valid. To think that, man, if I take this thing that I really care about and turn it into a career where somebody pays me for it, is it going to take the fun out of it? And I think that can happen, but money tends to do that with things, because money, in the same way that a YouTube video has, viewer numbers and these metrics that are very concrete and simple, money kind of does the same thing. If you do something and you sell it for X amount of dollars, then that feels like it's assigning a value to that thing.
Right.
You brew a batch of beer and then either it sells or it doesn't. And, that's not the same thing as you making it and deciding how much you like it. But I think if you understand that and you are very careful about how you think about money in those types of reward systems, I think you can continue to focus on that other stuff about how much you enjoy something, how rewarding it is to you for its own sake. And
Right.
it's almost a discipline, I think, of just making sure you think that way. And it can be hard not to, but I think that's a key part of trying to make sure that you still enjoy what you do if you do start getting paid for it. Which is with my YouTube channel. My favorite video that I ever did, the one that I was most happy with, is my least watched video on the channel.
Which one is it?
The performance anxiety one.
Yeah.
Nobody liked it, or nobody watched it, but
I bet like 50,000 people probably watched it, but
I don't know the
care
number,
about
but
that number because you have one that has like 5 million or something.
well, okay, but that's still a really good point. It's as stupid as it is. Yes, that's a lot of people. If you think about it, I talked about something for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever it was, and tens of thousands of people watched it. That's a hell of a lot of people. But it doesn't feel like a hell of a lot of people if you did something else that got more. And so in a stupid way, doing this video that got a lot more viewership made me enjoy this other one less, which is dumb. And that's just the wrong way to think. But
I kept thinking of your YouTube channel when I was thinking about this topic, because it didn't have to start. I mean, this was begun by you with your passion for teaching. I mean, you've always been interested in teaching. You've always been really good at it. And so you just started this channel where you were teaching. And so that very much started with a passion. And then all of these other things started creeping in. And if you had been really conscious of it, of course you really couldn't have been. You didn't know these things existed. But if you had been really conscious about all these other things creeping in, you could have possibly fielded them away. You could have hired someone else to deal with the social aspect of it. You could have done something to keep the passion moving forward for you
and protected.
Keep it safe.
Yeah.
Yes. Keep it sacred. Keep it secret. Keep it safe.
Yeah.
You could have protected it. But instead, all of these other things started creeping in. It wasn't the fact that you were getting paid for it. I don't think
it wasn't.
No. But it's all of these other things that start covering up the passion. And I think a big mistake a lot of people make is blaming just the fact that they made a career out of it as the problem. But in fact, it was not the career part of it. It's just the fact that it's been watered down. The passion has been watered down or diluted by a lot of other things that you could have possibly gotten rid of or worked to field away from that passion.
No, I think you're exactly right. And I think step one is you have to figure out why you like something. With the YouTube channel, I didn't think about this at the time, but I liked doing that. I wanted to do that because I was teaching in person and I was having to explain things over and over, and I had a lot of beginner students, so I had to do a lot of very basic explanations for basic concepts. And I became very interested in, how do you explain this really well? How do you do it in a way that somebody can genuinely understand it when they're hearing it for the first time and have a deep understanding of it, not just some superficial memorize some rules or memorize some basic things. Like, I want them to feel it and get it and be able to reason from there. That was very fascinating to me. That was what made me excited about that.
And it should still be
It does. It does.
The problem is you've started associating all these bad things with all
Yes.
these originally really good things. And so you've written off the passion.
No, I have not. I have not written it off.
Well, that's good to hear. But okay, so, well, all right, continue.
But no. But you're exactly right. Yes, that thing that I really enjoyed and was very interested in, that got crowded out by a lot of other things. And like we said, just the fact that my explanation of something got scored by a system that does not always rate the best work the highest, right? My most popular video is not my best. I would say it is one of my least good videos, or one that I'm least happy with.
Right.
But that is not how YouTube works. YouTube does what YouTube does. And that just happens to be a topic that a lot of people search for, and it happens to rank highly, whatever. But it kind of violated my own value system of, I like what I did, or I'm happy with what I did because I am, and I think it works, and I like it. YouTube doesn't respect that. It can't, obviously. It's just a popularity thing. And a million other things, well, we talked about that for an hour earlier.
It plays into all of these different topics.
Right. But I do think a major part of that, following the YouTube thing was absolutely a following a passion thing. And it was becoming a career. It was not enough to live off of, but it was on its way, put it that way. And I wound up, I don't want to say failing, because I'm very proud of what I did, but I stopped doing it, and I did not continue to work on it and push it into that status of being full-time job, career, only source of income type of thing, because of those other things that happened. But I do not think that was the fated outcome. I think it did not have to go that way. If I was smarter about it and I was better able to understand all of those issues, I think it certainly could have just continued to go, and I could have probably done a lot better with it. Not hit that wall of, oh my God, this is too much and I can't do it anymore.
Right. I think if you are going into a career with your passion, you need to protect that passion.
Yeah.
And it is not in the way that you need to hide it. I mean, unless you're totally satisfied, then forget it. You don't need to change anything about your life. But if you want to continue this passion, you need to protect it and be very, very self-conscious, or very aware of what's going on. If you're no longer enjoying it, why is that? Are you really tired of the thing, or has something else entered the stage? Is something else messing with it?
Right.
Because that's probably the case.
Right. And I do also think that you have to recognize that no matter what it is that you're passionate about, the thing that you love doing, if you're going to get paid for it, you're going to be doing something different. At least some, maybe not entirely, but it will be, by definition, you're not going to sit around all day doing exactly what you want to do or feel like doing.
A little different, yeah.
Well, I mean, I bring that up because, again, there is this fantasy of the future of, I have this thing that I love and I want to do it, and that's just my calling.
Right.
And maybe there are some examples of people getting to do that, but for the most part, not. Even my mind, like the pinnacle of that is being a famous musician, where you're a band and people love you and they just give you money to hear your music. You were there, I think. Do you remember the Opeth concert that we went to at the House of Blues?
I went to multiple Opeth concerts. Which one?
The one where they didn't play any, where they play like an acoustic set, and
yeah,
remember that one?
Everyone was really angry. Yeah.
Yeah. I keep thinking about that because, I mean, they're Opeth. They're certainly towards the pinnacle of what you can be as a metal band, right?
Yeah.
And they're amazing and they write music and they had been doing this for decades and they decide, okay, you know what? We are actually a little bit tired of doing this thing and playing the same songs over and over that everybody loves. Let's do something a little different and do a tour where we play acoustic guitars and stuff. And they got yelled at by their
Yeah.
fans, all the people that like them were still pissed at them and saying, "Oh, you suck, play metal." And they don't even get
Right.
to do this. I mean, they did it, and I don't know how much it bothered them, but it certainly wasn't a great show because the
Right.
crowd is angry. Even them, which to me, is the perfect dream if you're a musician and you're wanting to play metal music, right? Even they can't do whatever they want. Or if they do, there's some repercussions to it.
Yeah.
There's point is, no matter what you do, you're going to have to do some things that you don't necessarily like if you're
Right.
making sure that you get paid for it, right?
Yeah. And to me, making a career out of art, I am okay with compromising on some things in order to make money, in order to give myself the excuse to continue working on art. I mean, that's the only way I can keep
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah.
If part of my time is compromised and I'm doing things that I'm not totally into, that's fine, because as soon as that's over, I can continue working on what I really want to work on. Making it a career makes it a priority, and I get to continue working on it. If you don't make it a career, you run the risk of losing it as a priority, and
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a hobby. It becomes a guitar in the back of your room, and it just sits there, and you never get to play it anymore because it's no longer a priority in your
Yeah.
life. It's just a hobby, and hobbies get pushed to the side as you get older, and you have to make money, and you have to be more realistic about things. So I have never regretted turning my passion into a career. And if you are as passionate about whatever skill or hobby you have, I would suggest doing the same thing, because I have never regretted it. There are days where it's hard to continue working because it may not line up perfectly with my passion, and that compromise might be a little too big. But that ends eventually, and you go right back to working on the thing you really want to work on, because you
Yeah.
get to, because you made it a career.
Yeah. To me, my advice for anybody, I guess, is that you should try and maximize your enjoyment of the stuff that you do, right? For some people, they don't really love accounting, but they're okay with it. And they get a job being an accountant, and then they go home and they play music, or they make pottery, or they cook food, whatever it is they love. Like, that's the right
Yeah.
equation, I think, for some people. If you love
Yes.
cooking, and then the logical outcome is not that, okay, I should definitely own a restaurant, because
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
owning a restaurant, I don't think there's really a career where you just got to cook food in the same way that you love doing it at home. Being a line cook is rough. It's very intense, and it's not the same experience. And sometimes, like, your experience is just, it's better off being left that way, where you do a job that hopefully you like, or at least like parts of, and then do the thing you love. And then in other cases, if you can take the thing that you're passionate about, like art or music or anything, and turn it into something that you do throughout the day as your job, even if it's almost certainly not going to be exactly that, and you're still able to protect that thing you care about, still be passionate about it, still enjoy it for the reasons that you enjoyed it in the first place, then you should do that, if at all possible, because that's a great outcome. That means you get to enjoy a lot of stuff and only have to make some small concessions for your job.
Absolutely. And the way you were talking about classical guitar earlier, and how the performers, if you really want to succeed at it, you have to practice every single day,
Yeah.
and all that. And though I think that is true, on the flip side, when I was learning art, I would hear people talk about getting a job as a concept artist or illustrator or whatever as being this this incredibly hard, almost impossible thing that almost no one can achieve, that you have to work nonstop every second of the day on.
Right.
And so I would just, to balance it out, I would say for me it absolutely was possible. I didn't have to completely give up my health and well-being to pursue this thing nonstop every day. I just tried to be smart about it. I worked hard on it. I tried to be focused, and after a couple years, I was able to get a job. So, just to balance it out,
Yeah.
err on the side that it is possible for you to achieve this thing.
Well, I think what you should do is you should, as much as you can, try and figure out how possible is it? How many jobs are there? You know, for classical music, yeah, if you want to be a famous performing classical guitarist, you're gonna have a really hard time. You better be unbelievably good at it to break into that. But if you
Right.
just want to play and get paid, you can get a job at a church or performing. There's army jobs for performing music, you know, but go research that stuff. Go on Glassdoor, go on, you know, job sites and see what positions are available, you
Oh,
know.
and the other thing I would say is that I researched so much online. I mean, every Google search was I tried to research what types of jobs can I get as an illustrator. And though it is not like this for every field, I never found the job that I'm actually working at now. It did
Yes,
not
yes.
exist online. I mean,
Right.
I would never have known about this if it wasn't for my friend then talking to his friend and then that guy referring me to these other places. I didn't know they existed. So the best thing you can do is stop Googling and start sending out emails to actual people because, well, for some fields,
Yeah.
the it's a totally different world than what is represented online. It's just there's so many other jobs that you never would have thought of that exist that just aren't on the internet when you Google search them. So talk to real actual people
Yeah, no,
and
that's a
make connections.
extremely
Yeah.
good point. Yeah, just because you don't see it online doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You know, do
Right.
the best research that you can, and if that means reaching out to people, then do that. You know, but
Because there's probably people that play classical guitar in movies or whatever. I mean,
yeah,
there's so many different weird things you wouldn't think of.
right. Yeah, that's my point, I guess, is try to get a realistic picture of what will it actually take for me to get paid playing classical guitar. Try and find what jobs are out there and try and understand what you would have to do to get to that level where you could get that kind of job. And if that means that you need to be playing nonstop for 10 years, then decide if that's something you want to do or not. And if it means that it doesn't take that long and you could work on it for a couple years, then okay, and that's, you know, something you could do. But as much as you can, do the math and try and come up with a realistic picture of how would I actually turn this into a career, because like I said with the music thing, I had no idea. And the logical thing was that I would wind up teaching, which is exactly what happened. And I wasn't unhappy with that, but it wasn't the fantasy. So
Right.
if I had thought about it more, you know, I don't know, maybe I would have made different decisions or at least understood where I was headed better.
Yeah. So try to always take away the vagueness and the
Yeah.
fantasy of the future and make it a realistic thing.
Hmm.
See if you can find a person that actually does the thing that you want to do and then talk to that person.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Just be practical about it, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. That's probably all I got on this.
I think I'm good too. I think that's what I wanted to say. But well, parting thoughts. If you have a job that sucks, that makes you miserable, and I know a handful of people that have this,
Yeah.
get out. Don't do that job. You know, if there's anything in the world that you're passionate about, then work really hard, or try really hard to figure out how you get your career on a path where you get to do things that you enjoy, or at least get to be with a good team of people or in a fun environment or anything. But if one extreme is getting to follow this thing that you've always loved, and you know that's what you're looking at on the one side of it, the other side of being in a miserable job, like there's a lot that's in between, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that
Yeah.
you shouldn't be in a miserable job. You can do something that you at least enjoy, even if it's not your perfect picture, fantasy next Lady Gaga type of dream. You know,
Right.
you can,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm not doing exactly what I want to do. I mean, I would love to work in
right.
oil paints and work 100% traditionally, but
And same for me.
I'm almost 100% working in Photoshop and not touching traditional mediums at all. But at the end of the day, I'm still doing
Yeah.
a percentage of the thing I'm passionate about. So even though there are aspects of the job that I'm not happy with, I still get to fall back on that thing that I really am very happy with.
Yeah. Yeah, same. I think I'm 80% passionate about what I do, and I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah. Be happy with 80%.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you next week.